The girl had no name, at least none she could remember. The first memory she had of herself was waking up under the skeletal remains of a broken wagon, the wooden wheels half sunk into the dusty earth. Around her, the world seemed silent, except for the occasional cry of a crow or the whispering wind that cut through the dried grass. Her siblings huddled close to her, shivering despite the thin threadbare blankets they shared. She brushed the hair out of their eyes and tried to smile, but her own lips felt raw from dryness and neglect. Hunger gnawed at her stomach like a persistent shadow, yet she kept it at bay, swallowing what little scraps she could find and passing what remained to her brother and youngest sister. The town of Dustwell Creek was small and merciless. People noticed the three children wandering near the outskirts, but most pretended not to see them. Those kids belonged to no one, they whispered. Others gave quick, pitiful gestures, half a loaf of bread, a handful of dry beans, but nothing more. The girl learned early that sympathy was fleeting, like the morning fog that evaporated as the sun climbed higher. She didn't cry. Crying drew attention, and attention brought questions no one wanted to answer. Her role was simple: protect her siblings, keep them fed, and survive. That was the only certainty in a life otherwise filled with uncertainty. She remembered fleeting flashes of the past, a mother with warm hands and a quiet voice, a father whose laughter had once filled the small cabin they'd lived in. But those memories were like broken glass, sharp, distant, and impossible to piece together. Some nights, when the wind howled against the wagon, she would press her face to the wooden planks and imagine them walking back into their lives, rescuing them from this endless loneliness. But dawn always came, bringing with it the harsh light of reality. No one was coming, and they were truly alone. Every day was a battle. She scavenged behind the saloon for leftovers, snatching stale bread and tossing a few coins to the street dogs who often contested her finds. When she came across a handful of discarded vegetables or a chunk of moldy cheese, she felt like she had discovered treasure. She portioned carefully, making sure her siblings got more than she did. Some mornings, her brother's small face would light up with delight over a single scrap, and the youngest would giggle at the simplest gesture, a smile, a brush of hair, a gentle hand on her shoulder. Those tiny sparks of happiness were her only reward, her only reason to keep going. Despite the hardships, the girl had grown clever. She learned to read the moods of strangers, to anticipate which passerby would throw a bone and which would swing their gaze away with disdain. She became an expert at hiding their meager possessions, scraps of clothing, a few coins, a ragged blanket, because theft was a constant threat. Yet, there was also a stubborn resilience in her that surprised even herself. She refused to give in to despair. Even when the nights were cold and the wind sliced through the thin blankets, she whispered promises to her siblings. "Tomorrow, we'll eat better," she'd say. "Tomorrow, it will be different." And though she didn't know if tomorrow would ever come, the words gave her a fragile hope to hold on to. It was during one of these uncertain days that he arrived. Dust swirled along the main street of the town as if the earth itself were restless. A stranger rode into Dustwell Creek, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a wide-brimmed hat and a horse that seemed almost as steady as its rider. There was a calm authority in his movements, a quiet assurance that made the townspeople pause and stare. His eyes swept over the town, but it was the girl and her siblings, huddled near the edge of the creek, that drew his gaze. She had been shielding them with her small frame, her arms wrapped tightly around her brother and sister as if she were the only barrier between them and the harsh world. The rancher, whose name was Cade Mercer, stopped his horse a few yards away and studied them. Something in his chest tightened, a mixture of recognition and empathy. He had seen fear and struggle before, on his ranch, in the lives of those who were overlooked. But the sight of this girl, so small and determined, protecting her siblings with sheer force of will, stirred something he hadn't felt in years. He dismounted slowly, not wanting to startle them, and reached into his saddlebag. There was food, yes, but also warmth, and most importantly, a willingness to help without a single question. Cade Mercer returned the next morning, his horse's hooves kicking up clouds of dust as he rode slowly toward the edge of town. In his hands were 3 tin plates, a loaf of freshly baked bread, and a thick woolen blanket. The children froze, unsure if this was another trick of the cruel world or something real. The girl's heart beat faster, a mix of hope and fear tangled in her chest. She had learned to be cautious, trust came slowly, and kindness often had a hidden cost, but something about Cade felt different. "Morning," he said gently, his voice calm and steady. "I brought something for you all." The girl studied him for a long moment. His eyes didn't waver, didn't judge. They simply looked at her and her siblings with a quiet concern that felt foreign yet comforting. She didn't speak. Instead, she knelt beside her brother and sister, keeping them close while she watched him carefully. Cade knelt too, setting the food and blanket before them without a single demand or question. "You got a name, sweetheart?" he asked softly, as if the question itself carried no judgment. The girl's eyes narrowed. She had been asked this countless times by strangers, teachers, even the sheriff, and always, she had no answer. "I only answer when someone needs me," she replied quietly, her voice almost a whisper. Cade frowned, not in annoyance but in thoughtfulness. "That's a strong answer," he said. "But I think you deserve more than scraps and running. All of you do." Over the next several days, Cade returned repeatedly. He didn't come with demands or ultimatums, but with lessons and care. He showed her brother how to whittle sticks into small tools, taught the youngest how to braid rope, and left gifts, small, thoughtful things like soap, boots, and dried meat. He never asked for anything in return. The townspeople noticed, of course. Whispers traveled faster than the wind in Dustwell Creek. "Why's a rancher wasting time on strays?" someone asked. "He'll regret it. That girl's trouble waiting to happen," another muttered. Cade ignored them all. He was patient, steady, and unyielding, like the slow pull of the river through the creek. Slowly, the girl began to notice that the world didn't always have to be cruel. That even though people might fail you, there were those who would not. That the kindness of a single person could feel like the dawn breaking after a lifetime of darkness. One evening, the girl struggled to hide a torn boot she had worn until it fell apart. Her fingers trembled as she tried to patch it together with scraps of cloth and thread. Frustration boiled over into tears, hot and bitter, spilling over her cheeks without warning. Cade, who had been quietly observing from a distance, knelt beside her. "You don't have to do everything on your own," he said softly. She looked up at him, anger and fear flashing in her eyes. I have to protect them," she whispered. If I fail, they'll be lost." "You're strong, yes," Cade said, "but strength doesn't mean you carry the world alone. You don't have to. You have me now, and all of you have each other." She didn't respond immediately. The words sounded strange, even frightening. Could anyone really care without wanting something back? Could a stranger, no, a man she barely knew, really offer them safety and a home? Cade's patience never wavered. Night after night, he came by, sitting on the edge of the wagon or leaning against a fence post, letting them adjust to the idea that someone could care. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped behind the dusty hills and painted the sky in bruised purples and golds, he spoke the words that would change everything. "You deserve more than scraps and fear," he said, his voice unwavering. "All of you do. Come home with me. Come to the ranch." The girl froze, her hands gripping her siblings tightly. A home, no one had ever offered them that. Charity, pity, fleeting gestures, yes. But a home, that was something she had only dreamed of, a word she didn't even know how to hold. "Why?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Cade met her gaze, steady and certain. "Because family isn't always about blood," he said. "It's about choosing someone, and once you choose, you never leave. I choose you. I choose all of you." Something in her chest cracked, and for the first time in years, hope bloomed, not a fragile, trembling hope, but one that felt real, almost tangible. She looked at her siblings. Their eyes mirrored her own surprise, their tiny faces filled with tentative trust. Slowly, carefully, she nodded. Life on the Mercer Ranch was unlike anything the children had ever known. The mornings were filled with golden sunlight that spilled across wide, open fields, and the air smelled of fresh hay, leather, and the faint, sweet scent of wildflowers along the creek. There were chores, yes, and lessons that tested their endurance, but for the first time, there was also warmth, laughter, and safety. The girl watched her siblings run freely through the pasture, chasing calves and discovering the rhythms of ranch life. Their eyes sparkled with joy, and the sound of their laughter became a balm to the constant ache she had carried in her chest. Yet, for all the joy surrounding them, the girl still felt a shadow within herself, a quiet, stubborn doubt that whispered she didn't belong. She learned quickly how to feed the chickens, groom the horses, and mend fences, yet she remained cautious around the neighbors and visitors Cade introduced them to. "What's your name?" asked the teacher on her first day at the one-room schoolhouse in town. The question was simple, but it struck her like a knife. For years, she had lived without a name, without identity, and now she had to claim one for the first time. Her throat tightened, and words refused to form. She simply stared, eyes wide and uncertain. That night, after the sun had dipped behind the hills and shadows stretched across the ranch, Cade found her sitting on the porch steps, gazing at the stars. Her small hands fidgeted with the hem of her dress, and her eyes reflected the vast sky above, searching for a place where she might finally feel at home. Cade sat beside her, quiet and steady, letting her space remain hers while offering his presence as reassurance. "You don't have to carry the past anymore," he said softly, breaking the silence. His voice was gentle, patient, and unshakable. The girl swallowed, tears threatening to spill. "I still don't have a name," she admitted, the words trembling from her lips. She realized that despite the safety of the ranch, the laughter of her siblings, and the warmth of Cade's kindness, a piece of her heart still felt rootless, wandering. Cade turned to her, placing a firm but gentle hand on her shoulder. "You do now, if you want it," he said. There was no pressure, no judgment, only an invitation, a choice. The girl looked into his eyes and saw something she had not allowed herself to see in years, unwavering trust. A life she could choose, a family that had chosen her, and the chance to step into a future without fear. Her chest tightened, and a sob escaped before she could stop it. It was not a cry of despair but one of release, a release of years of loneliness, hunger, and uncertainty. Cade held her, steady and patient, letting her grief pour out. "You're a Mercer," he said finally, his voice strong yet tender. "All three of you, from this day forward." The words struck her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Mercer, her new name, carried weight, strength, and belonging. For the first time, she felt that she was not invisible, that she could stake a claim in the world. Her heart swelled with relief, gratitude, and a sense of wonder that nearly brought her to her knees. She clutched her siblings to her side, feeling the warmth of their small bodies and realizing they, too, had a home now, a place where they would never be left behind again. In the following weeks, she embraced her new life with cautious joy. She attended school with her siblings, learning to read and write under the patient guidance of a teacher who noticed her keen mind. On the ranch, Cade taught them skills they had never imagined, how to care for horses, mend fences, and track the movements of cattle. Slowly, the girl discovered that she could dream again, that hope was not a fragile illusion but something real, something she could nurture alongside her siblings. Evenings on the porch became their ritual. They would watch the sun set behind the rolling hills, painting the sky in brilliant oranges, purples, and golds, while Cade told stories of his youth, his voice weaving warmth into the quiet. Sometimes the girl would speak, sharing memories of the life they had left behind, not out of longing, but to honor the journey that had brought them here. And Cade always listened, never rushing, never judging, always reminding them that they were worthy of love, of care, of belonging. The girl learned to laugh again. She learned that a name could carry power, that it could claim her place in the world. And as she whispered her new name into the night, the stars above seemed to shimmer brighter, as if celebrating the arrival of someone who had finally found where she belonged. For the first time, she could imagine the years ahead, not as a struggle for survival, but as a life filled with hope, family, and the quiet, steadfast love of a man who had chosen them when no one else would. In that moment, beneath the endless sky and surrounded by the life she had been given, she knew with certainty that they were home. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe in a future where love, safety, and family were not just dreams, but reality. If you want, I can now compile the full 3-part story into one polished version, ready to be published or shared, with all parts expanded and flowing smoothly. Do you want me to do that?